If you've been using CRM or Dynamics 365 customer engagement for any length of time, then hopefully you are familiar with the options or the personalization settings for each user. So this is something that is accessible by them. They can come in, they can set the default pane when they log in, they can set the certain number of records per page, the currency, time zone, that kind of thing. There's also three very specific settings that are important that if the user comes in and changes themselves could cause pain, frustration or annoyance for a system administrator. Now these settings can be accessed using XRM Toolbox. If you're not familiar with that, certainly go ahead and Google it and have a look. I'll put a link in the related blog post, but that's something where you can log in and you can use a plugin to look at the user settings, and you can make changes to it, and you can actually access and change these settings over for the users. Now the reason why it's a bit frustrating is we'll walk through these different settings. The first one is it says select whether other users can send email for you. Now I think the way it's worded can make some users a little bit nervous and think, oh, so these users are going to send emails and pretend that they're me, blah blah blah. The purpose of this is going to be likely you'll have workflows that are set up in your CRM environment, and those workflows might say, okay, well, when something like when an opportunity is closed, maybe send an email to a group of people from the person that closed the opportunity, the salesperson. We want to be able to send that email out. If they don't have this ticked, then that's not basically going to allow that to happen. There might be other workflows that do things where an email needs to be sent on behalf of somebody. So if that's unticked, it can cause errors, it can cause workflows to fail, and notifications aren't going out. So it's important to have that selected. Now, anyone that's been a system administrator, you can ask users, you can go and send them emails and say, hey, can you make this change? And sometimes it's just physically sitting down and forcing them to do it. So if they come in and unselect that, that's going to be a pain. The next thing is if you are tracking emails and you're using the Outlook app, so the Dynamics 365 app for Outlook, which is the latest version, most current version, and that's the app that shows on the right hand side and uses the unified interface. So this is the ways in which you want to actually track emails. Now, the most common and most logical one, and the one that causes the least amount of issues in my experience, is the setting that says email messages in response to Dynamics 365 email. Anybody that says all email messages, to me, is just being a little bit lazy. But you've also got potential challenges if someone wants to track all email messages from Dynamics 365 leads, contacts and accounts, because you actually can have users that are set up as contacts, and that can potentially cause issues as well. So if within your organization you've made a decision and said we only want to allow this one, then again, if somebody comes in and changes this, we want to know about this. We want to know immediately, because that could cause problems. Then the last one that can potentially cause issues is this setting right here, which is selected by default to say automatically create records in Dynamics 365. This is basically when a sender of a tracked email or an appointment or a meeting, if the email is tracked but the email address isn't in Dynamics, do we want to automatically create a record for that email address? And we can say, yes, we want to create a record and we want to create contacts, or we want to create leads. Now, if somebody has this set and they don't know that is doing that, and they're also tracking emails, what ends up happening is you've got all of these erroneous records that don't have a first name, don't have a last name, they just have an email address, they're not linked to any accounts. So it's a real pain, because if they don't know it, they could be creating a lot of those, and that's got to be then cleaned up, removed, analyzed, and so on. Alright, so these are the three settings. So like I said, it's only the user that can get access to change these unless you go in using the XRM toolbox and changing the user settings using that plugin. However, you would have to check that on a regular basis. So what we're going to look at now is a flow that can send you an email notification immediately as soon as somebody's changed one of these settings. All right, so let's go ahead and have a look at this. We're going to go ahead and we'll edit the flow, and it's going to be triggered when a record is updated. Now, the record that gets updated is an entity called user settings. It is not the user, it is a specific entity that stores all of that information. So when a record's updated, now what we want to do is we don't care if they've changed their currency, we don't care if they've changed their time zone, it's only those 3 areas that we looked at. Alright, so the first one is the auto create contact on promote. Now that is this one right here, and we're basically saying if it doesn't equal 0, so 0 would be not selected at all, but doesn't equal 0, therefore it must be selected to say yes, create a contact, or yes, create a lead, then we want to know about it. Or if the incoming email filtering method has been changed and does not equal 1, so that incoming email filtering method is this right here, and this option is 1. If it doesn't equal 1, therefore it must equal one of the other 3, then we want to know about it. And finally, is send as allowed? If it's equal to no, meaning that this is unticked, we also want to know about it as well. So it's an or condition, so we're looking to see if any of these things have been changed. All right, so now what we're going to do is, because these fields, the values are numbers or they're true false, we want to be able to put that into an email and have the person receiving the email, it could be any number of people, you might set it up and actually have those notifications go to someone else. So let's give them a little bit of information so when they're looking at the email it makes sense and it's not just a number. Now here's what we can do, is we can basically create an expression, and if we hover the mouse we can see we're basically saying if that value is 2, then we're going to show yes hyphen leads. If it's 1, it's going to be yes hyphen contacts, otherwise it's going to be no. Okay. Then for the next one, we're going to do an expression for the incoming email method. So this is, we're basically checking the values of that, and it's 0, 1, 2, or 3, but what we're doing is we're saying if it's 0, that's all email messages. If it's 1, it's email messages in response to Dynamics 365 email. If it is 2, it's email messages from Dynamics 365 leads, contacts and accounts. And if it's none of those, it must be 3, therefore we're going to say email messages from Dynamics 365 records that are email enabled. So we're basically mapping those values into an actual text string so that we can actually see what it means. Then we're going to do a compose, all of these are compose steps. So if you've never done a compose step, let me just show you this quickly. So we're basically going to type in compose, and we are picking the compose from the data operations, one of those actions. So is send allowed? So again, we're going to do an expression, and we are basically saying if the is send allowed, if it's true, so it's basically if it's ticked, then that's yes, otherwise that's no. Then what we're going to do is, because we're running this on the user settings entity, we actually need to do a get record step, and we're going to go ahead and get the user using the system user ID from the original trigger step. And then finally what we're going to do is, I'm using the mail, let me just show you this one. So we're using this as the action, and this is from the mail connector. If you haven't used it before, it's interesting because it actually sends it from a generic email address. To me, I like this for things like system type notifications, and you'll see that when we actually trigger this and send the email out. To me it just looks, it's more obvious that this is generated based on some kind of system reason rather than it coming from John Smith at yourcompany.com. So I'm going to put the email address that I want this to go to. The subject is user settings changed, and then I'm basically just putting in all of the information into the email body, and what I'm pulling in is saying, okay, well, this user's modified their personal option settings, these changes may cause issues related to email tracking or workflows running successfully. So the username, the full name of the user, their email address, the primary email. Then what we're doing is I'm using the outputs that I created where I was mapping the values into actual text strings. So I'm going to show each of those 3 outputs, and then I'm basically just putting that it's an auto-generated email, do not respond. Alright, so I've made a few changes on here when we were looking at it just a moment ago, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK so that we've actually saved that information. So again, remember, this is anytime someone goes in and makes those modifications, that's something that could potentially start causing issues. So if somebody has said, no, I don't want anyone to send emails on my behalf, then workflows could stop working. If we've said we want to track all emails, that could cause challenges and problems. We could start tracking emails in the system that are potentially confidential, or they could be emails that have been sent from other users that were not meant for everybody else to see, and therefore those emails could actually be tracked within CRM. We don't want that. Alright, so let's go ahead and we'll just see if that has run. Let me just make another change. Maybe I took... Alright, so we're going to go ahead and we'll say we'll track contacts. Oh, there we go. I was not being patient enough. Okay, so here we have that email that's come through. So this is what I was saying in terms of where it's coming from. So it's coming from Microsoft at powerapps.com. So again, to me, it just feels a little bit more sort of notification-like to where it's been generated by the system rather than just coming from another user. So here we've got all the information that's been pulled in, the username, the email address, and then we can see that yes, they want to auto-create contacts and leads, and it says yes, contacts. Email tracking is email messages in response to Dynamics 365 email. Send emails on users' behalf. Yes, that's fine. That's good. And then the comment that I said, do not respond. Now, also, this gives the option to be able to unsubscribe to these specific emails as well. So, I think if you have been a system administrator, if you've been somebody that's been responsible for users either setting them up, or if you're somebody that's responsible for making sure things are not tracked in the system that are that shouldn't be, that type of thing, then getting an immediate notification, I can now follow up with Megan Morker and say, hey, I noticed that you've changed this. Can you go ahead and change it back? Or what's the reason for you changing it? Let's discuss, maybe give some training, some education, that kind of thing. So hopefully this helps. Pretty straightforward flow to be able to set up, but should be very useful. Let me know what you think in the comments below.
Hi, I'm Megan Walker. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and that you learned something from it. If you don't want to miss out on any other content, you can go ahead and click on my face below to subscribe. And if you want to watch the next video, you can do that by clicking over here and go ahead and get started. Thanks again.